Hello and welcome to Season 8 of How to Start Up, a podcast for anyone starting a company. Hosted by me, Juliet Fallowfield, founder of PR, communications and podcast consultancy Fallowfield & Mason. When starting a business, founders have the opportunity to start with a clean slate, as well as start as they mean to go on. So in this season, we wanted to share as much as we can about how businesses can start with ethical practice at their core. We're all aware of how certain industries do a lot of damage. For example, fashion alone is responsible for 10% of the global man-made greenhouse gas emissions. However, the second any business owner turns on a light, they also have a responsibility to the planet. In this episode, I speak with Ginnie Chadwyck-Healey, founder of VCH Style. Ginnie is an environmentally conscious stylist and fashion writer who champions considered consumption and a more mindful approach to purchasing products. The former retail editor of Vogue and now contributor to The Telegraph and Grazia, Ginnie became self-employed to help guide her clients in purchasing fewer, higher quality items and share her philosophy on shopping sustainably. Given brands and businesses are all keen to secure editorial press coverage, I was keen to speak to Ginnie about how we can pitch to her with information that she really wants to hear about, how to avoid greenwashing, and some simple do's and don'ts when it comes to sustainable PR messaging. Hi Ginnie, thank you for joining How to Start Up today. It's wonderful to have you on. I would love it if you could kickstart with a brief introduction as to who you are and a bit about the role that you're doing now.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honour to be on a podcast like this. So I guess if you Googled me, Juliet, you would discover that either I worked at Vogue for 12 years or that I had postnatal depression. So it's really quite a varied background on Google. But the reality is I did work at Vogue for 12 years. I was the retail editor, so it sort of spanned commercial and editorial. And that really came to an end, sadly, after I realised I couldn't be a mother and work and commute. So something had to go. And so VCH Style, which is my brand now, literally my initials, is really a platform, but it condenses everything that I did at Vogue, but I do it for myself. So I do written work for The Telegraph and Grazia, and I present and I do content. But my big focus is on how we can shop with greater awareness and become more conscious about the way that we consume fashion. And it's a huge problem. It's a huge task. And it's not something I really thought I was going to get into, but ultimately I am a sustainable fashion advocate, I guess.
Well, congratulations, because we need more of you, that's for certain. And it's wonderful because you can see both sides of the puzzle. You've come from working with a big magazine house and publication and big brands and big advertisers, and now you're free and autonomous to work with brands that you really respect and you really admire and form an edit for consumers. So when I'm reading Grazia and I can see which brands you're writing about on your page and your column, I feel more informed. How is it you've ended up doing this?
So after I left Vogue, we were living in the country. We'd moved out 6 years ago. I just had my second baby. I did have postnatal. That is completely true, but that's for another podcast. But I realised that the women I was becoming friends with, meeting on the school run or, just bumping into in my day-to-day, they were the consumers that all these brands were trying to target, okay? On the whole, right? And yet these women were so confused by the noise that was being shouted at. They didn't know what trend they're meant to have. Clothing at that stage, because I was a bit in a dark place, was a bit like an armor. So it was like, oh, wow, you've got the new blah, blah, blah. And I just thought there is so much noise and all the magazines seem to be churning out. These are what you need, 10 things to have on your wish list, 20 things to own for spring, 5 items you should pack in your handbag, 10 things you can't live without this season. And I just thought this is a perpetual cycle of confusion, of consumerism at a rate that, quite frankly, the world can't afford and the planet shouldn't have to put up with. So I literally wrote the article for Stella magazine, which was, I used to work at Vogue, but these are the clothes I really wear. And it was never to diss Vogue. I absolutely loved my time there and I would absolutely play it all over again. It was such a happy career there. But ultimately, what Vogue was putting out and what real women that I certainly was meeting, there's such a disconnect. And I felt like being the person that said, you don't have to pine for all these things. You don't have to buy into every trend. Not every trend will suit you, and that's okay. And so naturally, it became a bit of a rebellion. Like, slow down and stop shopping? And do you really need to hit the sale rail again? And do you really need to follow that oversized collar trend in 17 different colorways? You really only need one great one. So it was completely organic. And then I got caught up in more of the science and statistics. Not caught up. I was carried, I guess. It's a positive. And so naturally, I've kind of moved into sustainability from a completely organic place. I know a lot of people who have worked in publishing have also done the same. So perhaps it's a slight kind of rebellious spirit, or perhaps it's just addressing the very fact that at a certain point in your life, when you have more important things than the need to save up for the latest trend, it's okay to say, do you know what? I was wrong 12 years ago. And actually what you really need now is these kind of pieces. And that's genuinely where it came from.
I was really excited to talk to you about this because you have the journalistic background and you'll have brands pitching to you to get in your columns and get that PR and editorial awareness. And there's so many things I want to talk to you about, what to do, what not to do when pitching to someone around sustainable and inverted commas brands, because ultimately the second you use electricity, you're not sustainable.
Yeah.
We met way back when I was at Chanel, you were at Vogue. There were 8 collections for fashion a year. And it was that churn, and I mean, insanely beautiful collections, but everything was around this calendar. You worked the marketing calendar and it was on to the next, on to the next, on to the next. It's same with editorial, on to the next issue. And one boss once said to me, he's like, great results, but you're only as good as your last month's worth of coverage. It's like that feeling, and especially when now you're self-employed, you can never do enough. It probably hasn't ever left me. But with fashion, to placate the big brands that are the advertisers to keep publications in business, we have seen this enormous shift with the big brands changing how they're developing their collections, what success looks like to them in terms of feasibility of how many pieces people should buy. You see Selfridges doing rentals. It has all changed in the last few years, which is incredibly exciting. But what's your take on that?
So I'm really pleased to see this conversation being had at, for instance, the Business of Fashion Forum. And they had a big question basically was put out to some of the big CEOs saying, if it's really about slowing down, then that means less profit. And that was quite a massive question to put to these huge brands. I've just seen the top ones at the moment. It's Chanel, Dior, Gucci. That's the running order today in June. And, they've got targets to not just meet, but they've got to beat them. They've got shareholders to keep sweet, some of them, and they've got bonuses to pay. And ultimately, you only achieve that by selling more products and making more money and maybe marking up products to a higher extent than you did 2 or 3 years ago. And we've seen that, perhaps the demand in China meant that people could really mark up goods a lot higher than they would have done a few years ago. But I grapple still with that need to create more, just to not just hit, but beat targets. So I actually don't have the right answer. It's something I'm sort of really brainstorming. But ultimately, I think capitalism, we need to a certain extent, but I think there's got to be a way where you have people, planet and profit on an even keel, or a much more even, more balanced keel. And at the moment, the CEOs of some of these companies are making such huge amounts of money and bonuses that it's still a huge disconnect with the people who are ultimately making the product. And I think we need to see more of a tilt of, if you like, for that to become a fairer way of living. And I think the fairness has to be something that we all begin to understand is, look, this might be a pipe dream of mine, but I just think we have to perhaps approach retail in a different way that is more balanced. And it really comes down to that. I mean, I've got friends who work in stock markets. They think I'm mad. And I'm also got friends who work with these big companies in M&A, that kind of world. And they're like, we cannot look at a brand now until they show us what their sustainability credentials are. So you've got two very opposing sides.
Yeah.
Yet everyone's trying to make money.
Well, this is what I'm hearing. This is what I'm seeing a lot is in the VC world, that they will only invest in brands that have an ESG framework from the get-go. Mm-hmm. And our learnings through going through the B Corp process was that you have to be profitable before you can save people and planet. But you raise a very, very pertinent point of like how much profit. Because if maybe less is more at that top end of that curve, where the people who are really profiting at that top end can take less and benefit more of the stakeholders across the whole production line. That's maybe where we'll see the shift. Given that you are a journalist, first and foremost, so you're writing for Grazia and The Telegraph, given that a lot of our listeners will have started businesses and be looking to editorial and trying to work out how to get into magazines, I often see brands greenwash, but I'm now seeing lots of brands green hush, so they don't talk about what they're doing. Where is that happy point of pitching to you and in the email title making sure it stands out to you as a writer, our sustainable brand X, Y, and Z? Sustainable to me as a PR doesn't hold any weight anymore.
No.
To you as a journalist, what would make a standout pitch?
So first of all, on that, I have to make a point. I would say using Instagram DMs as a way to make a pitch is not, in my book, a really successful way to approach someone, because...
Thank you.
Oh, really?
So we feel like, I'll just DM the journalist. And it's like, no, that's not going to really...
And that's not, I don't think that's us, revealing our age, Julia. I think actually you've got to approach it as you would work. And I do not want... I know my work is partly on social media, but there is no way that I'm monitoring my DMs as I would my work email inbox. So forget the DMs. It's really, I would say, a waste of your time, and make it more professional. And then I'll take it a bit more seriously, because there's a whole inbox I haven't even opened, just to tell everybody. I don't have a team monitoring my social media. It's just me.
And ultimately, to get a link, to get a high res, you need the email platform from a functional perspective. It needs to be in an email format.
Yes.
And everyone's like, you need to be on Slack, you need to be on LinkedIn. It's like, no, for a pitch, it has to be email.
Yeah.
I know there are journalists that do like DMs to the initial hook, but that's very few.
I don't. I'm just saying right now, I don't.
Thank you, Ginny.
I think you... I miss a lot in my DMs, a bit like you miss a WhatsApp if you don't read and reply straight away. So an inbox just feels much more professional. On the subject of greenwashing versus green hushing, no one's perfect. And I think this is the next tagline we're going to be seeing. So look out for this. No one's perfect, but it's all about making a start. So I just did a project with Westfield, and I knew in my mind, I was like, this is a bit of a disconnect, but actually Westfield across Europe ran a sustainability festival, the Good Festival, across every single shopping centre that they own in Europe across the same period of time. And I thought, you know what, it is a start. And everything they did and that they incorporated against, I admit, a backdrop of some of the biggest fast fashion names in the world, I was like, do you know what, at least they're trying. And they were supporting people that have no marketing spend, that have no bricks and mortar, that have literally, no chance of really being heard unless they can get in front of people's noses. So if Westfield can do it, then I think a lot of people can do it. But mostly, no one's perfect. We've got to start somewhere. And I think we've got to approach it as less shaming and more nurturing of new ideas. It's as simple as that. So if you want to get my attention, you can just personalize the title, because so often it's a new launch and it says, Dear Jennifer, and you're like, oh, and I delete it. If it can't even say my name, I'm really sorry, but I delete it. So I know that PRs have a huge job in doing all sorts of mail merging cleverness, which I can't even do. But ultimately, if you're targeting someone with a story on sustainability, people like me, I think, are still in the minority in terms of the audience that you're trying to target of journalists. I mean, so
you can take the time to tailor a pitch.
And no one reads email. Sorry to also say this. No one reads email. So keep it to 3 lines.
It anchors it in actually a real email rather than the blast.
Anchor. Great word.
I feel like it's something that we teach our clients a lot. It's like, also do as you would be done by. I'm so sick of getting spammed on LinkedIn and in my inbox of, we think we can improve your website. It's like, I don't have time for that. Unsubscribe. And you have to be GDPR compliant when you're blasting your emails. For me to land a story in your column, it is such a unique column that there is no blast attached to it. It needs to be a completely tailored pitch to products and stories and angles that would work for you. So when it comes to a ethically minded or sustainably focused brand that you might want to write about, what do you see like 10 a penny? What is not new news anymore to you?
I think lots of brands doing rental. I sort of think, is that not the death of retail if a big brand is now doing rental as well? And are you doing it to tick a box, or is it actually going to work, or does it undermine your full price product? Sorry, that was just me, thinking. I'm not going to mention names. I like charity link ups still that actually are not just a flash in the pan. I like kind of prolonged stage 1, stage 2, and eventually we would like to get to stage 3 of this partnership. To be honest, I'm still open to everything. I love ideas. That's probably why I do what I do. I love new ideas, fresh ideas, but I also love the merging of fashion and science. So anyone that is linking up with scientists who, quite frankly, never thought that they would be seen in the fashion space, I find that particularly interesting. And
well, it's backing it up presumably with good statistics
totally.
and actual proof.
Well, I quite loved that Boohoo sent me a press release the other day about their sustainability initiative, and that went straight in the bin.
Really? Why?
I'm so still quite appalled by that brand. So they've got to do more than send me a generic email. I'd quite like a meeting with them, to be honest, if you're listening.
Well, you heard it here first. And so that's the thing. I feel like a lot of this season we've talked about the fact that new founders, which is our audience, have an opportunity to start for good, and they have a complete blank canvas to start as the mean to go on. And many people I've interviewed have said, if you can get your structure, your process, your systems, your values, your culture, all of it in a good shape at the beginning when you're small, it just saves you so much time when you start to grow. Because I've hit the 3-year mark and my goodness, you feel the stretch. And I had a new starter yesterday who came on board. Said, I just got to say, I'm really impressed with your processes.
I loved your processes.
Anything to automate. It was Ewan Young from Out There magazine who said, automate, delegate, solve. I think it was back in season 2. And my God, it's helped me with time.
Automate, delegate, solve. She's writing it down.
But I think especially when you're becoming to your best business practice, and within that becomes sustainable and ethical practice.
Yeah.
Starting as you mean to go on means you will be that force for good. You will be leading the charge, and you won't have to unpick anything later. Yeah. And so a brand like Boohoo, for example, have a lot of work to do to undo some of the damage, or a lot of the damage they may have done.
Yeah.
Have you seen any particular interesting pitches come your way that have shown that they're capable of doing that?
I mean, let's just take this morning as an example of how I spent today, because it's less about a pitch, but more about me having my mindset changed. Boots, the big pharmaceutical retailer, I think it lost its way a little bit. Possibly other boutique websites came along and were much more sexy. And, I'm not someone who would buy my beauty products direct from the brand's website. I don't think many people are. So Boots has a huge hold over that market. I was researching how to recycle beauty packaging because it's really difficult. And that was my latest column. But also makeup compacts, lip gloss, all the little bits and pieces that clutter our makeup bags or beauty cabinets. And Boots, I have so far found, is one of the few brands, and there are a handful of others, but Boots, as a brand I would trust, put it that way, they are creating a buyback scheme of any branded packaging, as long as you scan it with your camera, and then they will assess it, and then you take it in and you get 500 Boots Advantage Card points when you also spend £10, but £10 is manageable. It's not 20. So it's not kind of off limits to most people, and you might be replenishing whatever you're recycling. And I just thought, clever you, because you lost your way. You're not very sexy. You're massive in terms of beauty and cosmetics retail. And, you're not a Cult Beauty, and you're not a Harrods Beauty Hall or a Selfridges Beauty Hall, but they knew they had to vie with the supermarkets as well, who have now bought in a lot more kind of sexy brands, and M&S is now quite a big beauty retailer. And I thought, well done for, sticking to the sustainability message in a way that is actually, it rewards us, not just with a feel-good factor. And I went further to see if there was anywhere near me, because I'm in the country, that might actually take back my products. And there is, and it's not too far. Whereas a lot of the times it's only available in London. And it was a refreshing kind of reassessment of a brand that I haven't really shopped at, perhaps maybe only at airports.
They're getting your loyalty back.
They've got me back. And actually, I've gone one step further in trying to set up a meeting with them because they need to shout about this service a lot more. But it's things like that where it just takes one moment of, oh, okay, I haven't tapped into you as a consumer, but I'm going to now research this on behalf of Grazia. And it just changed my perception. But there are so many brands out there that have started from a great point. You know, you've got the likes of Navy Grey, you've got Allbirds doing hugely well in America and beyond. You know, they've just gone public. You know, the jury's out on Adidas. I seem to be bombarded by Adidas shoes at the moment, advertising at me, and I'm trying not to buy yet another pair. But I think they've got the power and the money to do more. So let's not kind of have a go at them just yet. And then there are other brands which I don't know enough about the beauty market, but I think the likes of Lush is doing brilliantly in terms of their packaging. And the other day in store, they weren't offering gift wrapping. They were using dead stock fabric, and you would then tie up the bath bomb in a bit of dead stock fabric. And I just thought that's a simple way to cut a lot of waste for the consumer and probably cut costs for the retailer as well. So it's just little nuggets that really bring me joy. And I would say now, what I love most writing for the Telegraph and Grazia is that I am never tasked with covering advertisers. So I've asked every time, because it's ingrained in me, any advertisers I need to support, and the answer is always no. And that for me is the kind of autonomy that I was always yearning for.
That's pure editorial. That's pure ethical practice. So you're not being, in inverted commas, bribed by an advertising budget to support them in editorial. Your reader will be reading your genuine opinion. Genuine,
which is really hard for PR to then pitch to, because they can't say, but we advertise, because it's just what's going on in my mind and what I want to write about. But
I love that, because there's so many people like me who are supporting brands that have a zero advertising budget, and it is a pure story. And I think a lot of people don't understand the difference between advertising, editorial, and sort of paid, owned and earned. And if anyone has any questions, please contact me, because we can give you a paragraph on each. But when you have a big advertiser in a magazine, and magazines are businesses, and people forget this, they need to profit. Their asset is their editorial page, which has value, which means you can't put that editorial on your commercial website and sell from it. So there's all sorts of things you've got to think about it from a business perspective, which is what was interesting you said about Boots, because they're making it a really clever business decision.
Yes.
They will profit from this,
yeah,
but it's also doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So if you can tick both of those boxes, you're giving the feel-good factor to the consumer, you're helping your bottom line, which in turn gives more budget back into the business to then do more good. That sort of almost that full circle effect is super exciting. And if you're not having to write about advertisers, your readership will go up, the clicks will go through, because people are genuinely enjoying your stories, and those publications will benefit too. So it seems to be like a no-brainer.
Well, I think Hattie Brett, editor of Grazia, is to be applauded, because honestly, it just took me emailing her to say, Hattie, I've got some ideas. Can we have a coffee? And she's so on board with it that it actually makes me think Grazia is like a little bit ahead of the curve in certain ways in terms of sustainability. And she just commissioned 2 much bigger pieces on it. So that will come out later in the summer.
Which also means the reader wants it.
Yes, as long as it doesn't say sustainability. I think we just need to kind of get away from that word. There's got to be like new ways to approach it. And I really want to hammer home that no brand is perfect. So whether you're small or big, it's just about the small changes that you're kind of trying to implement. You don't have to be B Corp. I'm never going to just focus on B Corp brands.
This word sustainability I have a huge issue with, because if you do anything, the definition, if you do anything continually, you are sustainable. So you could be murdering someone with an axe every day, and therefore you're a sustainable axe murderer. It doesn't mean you're good.
No.
And what we know people understand or infer by sustainability is it's they're green, they're environmentally friendly, they're doing good things. Mm-hmm. What to you is the definition of sustainability in this ESG world?
Well, I prefer the word transparency. And I just think I try to be a transparent person. Therefore, why wouldn't I want to be a transparent customer or brand if I, was selling products? And I do think the people at the top of the pyramid, as it were, should really have a knowledge of where the bottom of their supply chain starts and who the people are that begin the whole process of production of a product that makes them, in many cases, billions of dollars. So for me, it's more about transparency and really taking the time to meet the people making your clothes, even if that means traveling. And that's what I noticed a lot with a lot of the independent brands that have had a huge success coming out of COVID, when we were all sort of inspired by the independent brands growing on social media. I think they all have taken a huge step in visiting those people who make their products. And I'm not saying that means their product's perfect, but even to travel to India, Bangladesh, Portugal, Turkey, wherever it is, I think that says a lot, because
they're looking them in the eye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's a really good, that's it. Looking them in the eye and vetting certificates, understanding standards, negotiating in real time with people who I just think it makes it much more of a human interaction. And okay, you can't do that perhaps if you are the CEO. Actually, you can do that if you're the CEO of Adidas or whatever it is. But, when you've got multiple suppliers across the globe, perhaps that's more difficult. But I think as your business grows globally, you probably have to take that transparency responsibility much more seriously and have a team dedicated to it. But, that will come in time. But it's just having...
And invest in it.
Yeah, I learned that from doing a collaboration with a tiny but very successful nightwear brand, If Only If, last year in 2022. My first ever collaboration. And it was really personal, both with Emily, the owner, but also her interactions with the design teams. She designs, but, liaising with the factories who are making her product and the tweaks. And they got it so right that we had one set of samples. So if you imagine, we could have got it really wrong and had 6 sets of samples, but that's because her relationship with her supplier is so strong and the communication is so clear and the trust is there. We just had one set of samples and we reduced the waste hugely. So It does pay off, I think, to take the time.
Well, that relationship building across any element of business when you're starting up is so important. I think we talk about remote working and it's great to give freedom and autonomy, but that in-person relationship you can build when you see people face to face is like nothing else. If you could wave a magic wand and all of the pitches to land in your inbox were a certain thing, what would you like to see more of from brands pitching to you? Or less of?
Oh my goodness. Well, okay, here goes. This is really...
In those 3 sentences, what do they need to tell you for you not to delete their email? And I should say, just for listeners, it's not just Ginny that deletes emails. I know editors that will delete 400 emails they get a day by the email title. They won't even open them. So editors are bombarded and they need to filter. So I'm sticking up for editors here. That you need to filter some way, somehow.
Okay, I've probably got 3 things. If you're going to invite me to an event, I wouldn't send it this week for next week. I would love more meetings. I think we've sadly fallen into a trap of hiding behind Zooms. But equally, a lot of people like myself have moved out of London. So really try and plot a back-to-back day of in-person meetings. So it's really hard because everybody's work days are very different to yours, perhaps. And then, short and sweet. And me personally, don't go overboard on the gifting. I'm not interested in the gifting.
It's wastage again.
And also don't send me things without asking if I would like them. It's, I'm amazed.
Every gemist is the same. It's because you feel like you've got that carbon footprint on your shoulders then.
And the recycling, send it in recyclable cardboard packaging if possible, because I've had lots of sustainable projects and launches that are sent huge press releases that I'm never going to read on kind of cardboard paper with a plastic sheen to it that I can't do anything with. It's just like a constant contradiction. So,
and yet they're claiming to be sustainable.
Exactly. Yeah. I've actually complained to a shampoo brand before. It's like, you can't send a shampoo bar, all singing, all dancing shampoo bar, but it came in a box the size of a shoebox, and it was just a total waste of space, literally. Like, you could do something so much more clever than that.
My first ever dear client, the Seated Queen, were like, we're a startup, we have no budget. Do we have to gift? And I was like, well, let's just do it when we get a warm lead. I will pitch to see if there's interest. If there's interest, then we'll post Royal Mail. They said it's taken us 3 years to get the right cap that's recyclable and recycled. And, they really wanted to do it the right way. It's like, we don't want to waste budget and we don't want to waste product. So it works both ways, from the bottom line and the environment. It ticks both boxes. Any last golden nugget pieces of advice you'd like to offer someone who's starting a business?
Don't feel like you have to get it all done, in the first month or year or first set of accounts. Like, don't panic. I'm saying this 6 years in, I definitely have moments of panic. Like, I haven't written the business plan. Find a business mentor. I have a business coach who I meet with once a month via Zoom. And because I work on my own, it's just a moment to say, to basically brain dump and either get approval or someone to say, what the hell are you thinking? That's a total waste of time.
They pull you out of the weeds.
Yeah, my agent is brilliant like that as well, because working in this world, you're trying to get away from the whole influencer thing and more towards actual kind of systemic change, if that's possible, and a bit more research as well. And mostly, can I just say that if you are listening and you feel like you are always working for free or giving away things for free or free product and nothing comes back, like, value yourself and others will value you. So if you can't afford to gift 20 editors and it's really keeping you up at night, don't worry. Like, just gift the 5 that you really want to build a relationship. And that sounds very crass and kind of, it's all about gifting. We know how much gifting goes on. It's a real bugbear of mine, but I don't think you need to kind of undervalue yourself from the outset.
And if you have a genuinely exciting product, the story will stand on its own 2 legs via an email and a high-res image. And I feel like on that email pitch, when they're sending those 3 sentences, that first email just needs to get a reply. The reply can then include the press release. The third answer can include the high res. You don't need to land the story in that first initial email.
Exactly. That's a very good point. Often when I'm being told about a jewelry launch and I then go back and I say, can I see your certifications for the Fair Trade Gold or whatever it is? And it completely flummoxes some people and I never hear from them again. But just hold back your ammo, as it were, until someone bites, and then you've got more of and then you strike up a rapport over email. Because I was really impressed the other day with a brand that had claimed it was organic. Can I see your certification of Ecotex organic cotton? And they came back with it. And I was like, oh, this is so refreshing.
Here's a Google Drive of all the certificates.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm few and far between asking for that, but I do think it will come. It's coming. More people will want to see validation of all these claims that are being made.
But not just the journalists. So we talk about B2C, business to consumer. We talk about B2E, business to employee. Employees are going to want to see the certification. Business to investor, they're going to want to see certification. You have to get your ducks in a row, and you cannot go out to claim something unless you can back it up. Whatever stat you're putting against your pitch, sustainably angled or not, you have to be genuine and authentic with it. And I think a lot of people say, oh, well, we'll just say this. It's like, no, that's a lie. Yeah. That's not going to wash.
I've seen a lot of that, and I've seen a lot of that at events. So I'm like, if you're going to go for a sustainability angle, don't then have crazy amounts of wasted at an event. In fact, the coolest event I went to recently, they sent you home with a brown paper bag with a really nice product in, admittedly, but you know what to do with that brown paper bag. You're not left with like a ribbon that you've got to do something with. And, there are cool, clever ways to make your mark in someone's mind. And that's ultimately what it's all about, isn't it?
Well, we offset a press trip recently and we said we know it's better if we don't do this, but given we want to take you to see the product and the founder, we'd rather offset it with a charity that meets 2 of the brand's UN sustainability goals. So it really genuinely dovetailed into the practice of the business because they were upcycling materials. And it just, for me, from a PR perspective, it ticked all the boxes. It was good messaging, it was authentic, and it was real. And it came with a certificate as well. So I was like, yes, this is proven. So something that we do with guests is the guest before you, which was Alex Head, founder of Social Pantry, which is a gorgeous catering company that employs a lot of ex-convicts and rehabilitates them into the workforce. Her question for you is, what is the biggest mistake that you've made in becoming your own boss, and what did you learn from it?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. I I'm not good at delegating. I need to delegate. I'm going to take your automate, delegate, solve and implement that. I need to get a PA. Okay, I'll be honest. I need to break up my week much more rigorously than I do. I do have children, which slightly obviously means that I might have to kind of run and stop everything. I would say try and lay out. Actually, it was Johnny Bowden who taught me this. Try and lay out your week so you know that every Tuesday is competitor analysis. Every Wednesday is product analysis. Every Thursday is like, let's just have a look at marketing, social media. Like, try and be a bit more constructive with your week. And then obviously have meeting days. Going back to what I was saying earlier, if you're not someone who lives in London like me, have your meeting days and be strict with that. And then for me, I love writing in the evenings. So it's more like have more structure to my week. I should probably implement that.
So what would your question be for the next guest?
So my question, eloquently put, I didn't write it as eloquently as this. On the days when you are feeling a little less positive about working for yourself and being a founder or of a startup or whatever you want to call yourself, and you might have a tendency to think, oh, I might pack this all in and go and get a full-time job with all the, trimmings. What do you do? Do you get up and go somewhere? Do you just shut your laptop and put it all away? What's the approach to take?
To manage that overwhelm. And I find this really interesting because you say go and get a full-time job, because my first year, my best friends kept sending me jobs. And I'm like, but I've got a job. I've made one up for myself. I'm fine. Do you not have faith in me? But a full-time job for someone else is so much easier than being self-employed. But full-time makes it sound like you're working more hours for someone else than you are for yourself. Whereas actually when you're self-employed, it's full-time plus.
And I did have a very lovely job offer the other day, and I toyed with it for about 30 seconds. And then I just thought, no, I don't want to be beholden to anyone else. Not that it makes this easier, but I love the autonomy that comes with this. And I love that we are seeing a generation of entrepreneurs come up through the roots and with great values. And it gives me so much hope.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's a study that I'll dig out somewhere that the brands being started now are a force for good, and collectively, was it 99% of all companies in the UK are small businesses? So small but mighty.
Small but mighty. I love it. We just need more investment in female founded businesses. That would be another topic as well. I'd love to see more of that from the big guns,
Thank you, Ginny. It's been fascinating talking to you, as always, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me, Julia.
If you'd like to contact Ginny, you can find all of her details in the show notes, along with a recap of the advice that she has so kindly shared. Thank you for listening to How to Start Up. I hope these conversations offer you some confidence, encouragement, and reassurance that you're on the right track. If you enjoy this podcast, I'd be so appreciative if you were to rate, review, and subscribe, as it will really help other people starting a company discover it. Founder of VCH Style.